So today we're talking about one of my favorite Sunday school lessons when I went to a church and learned about Daniel in the lion's den.
Hey, this is probably one of the most common stories, but there's so many good principles packed into this. So that's what we're talking about today on HC Daily.
You're listening to another episode of HC Daily, a daily devotional podcast that you can listen to at home or on the go. We believe that you can grow as much as you want to grow spiritually, and this podcast can be a part of your daily growth plan. So, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify or your favorite podcast app, we're glad you're here. Now, let's join our hosts, Jeff Forrester and Chris Zarbaugh, in the studio.
All right, well, Jeff.
Yes,
I have a
Chris.
question for you.
Welcome back, by the way.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
It's good
yeah.
to be back. Yes, although Wesley did a phenomenal
He
job.
did an amazing job.
Yes. So I was thinking about today's topic, Daniel the Lion's Den.
Yes.
So I thought to myself, what is the best zoo you've ever gone to or attended?
The best zoo.
I'm assuming you've been to a few.
I've been to a couple of zoos. I think my favorite zoo is the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago because
Why?
it's free.
Wow. Wow.
it's-
All the
it's
animal
like-
lovers are like, womp womp.
It's a huge zoo, a big zoo. It's right in the middle of the city, right up on the lake shore, and it's an old zoo, so it's been there a long, long time, and they've got pretty big endowments, so they've got a lot of resources. So it's surprising that it's a free zoo that has so many great resources.
Yeah.
So yeah, my daughter and I were there one time, and I had a project I was doing in Chicago, and she came with me, and in the morning we went, and the lions were just really kind of rowdy. We got over there, and there were 3 female lions, and they were fighting like crazy right against the glass, right by where there was not anybody else around us.
Wow.
And then the big male lion came out of the place we were sleeping and just come flying right at us as fast as he could. Knocked them around, got them all separated and quiet again, and then stood there. We've got a video of him, and he just yawns while he's looking at us, and he's clearly looking at us through the glass, and then he just yawns like his mouth's this big and his teeth are like that. It's pretty impressive, yeah. So it's cool. That's probably my favorite zoo.
That would have been a better story had you said he broke through the glass, and like ate one of your children.
Well, that would have been exciting. I don't know if it would have been better, but it certainly would have been a story to tell. Yeah. So, Jenna, if you're watching, Chris would prefer that you had died in that story. So.
It would have been just a better story.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it'd been better. So, anyways, we are talking about lions today.
Yes, we
which
are.
is cool. Have you had a lot of encounters with lions?
I have. Yeah.
we were just
actually.
in Tanzania together with
Yeah,
lions.
we saw lions. Lion came right up to me.
Yeah.
Almost wet my pants. It was a lioness. Because those goofy Jeeps they have no doors.
Right, in the doors.
Which means, we all know that the lions are used to people in those, what do they call them? Those
It's a
habitats.
national park.
Yeah, national parks. But,
Yeah, just to be clear though, that national park was 1,300 square miles.
yes,
So
pretty wild.
They were wild, right?
Yeah.
There's no fences or anything.
Right. So if the lioness wanted to and
Yeah.
just felt like, I think I'll attack this guy,
Yeah.
she could have totally done that.
Oh yeah. You were in her living room.
Yes.
Right. She would have been justified.
Yeah, she was as close to me as you are right now.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. So today we're talking about Daniel and the lion's den, and there's this king. His name's Darius. He may have been in history. We also have a king named Cyrus. That's the same time, same age, who was the king of the Medes and the Persians. So this is probably the same guy. Is who we're talking about, just a different way to say his name. So anyways, here it goes. It says, Darius the Mede decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces, and he appointed a high officer to rule over each province. The king also chose Daniel and 2 others as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interests. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, completely trustworthy. So they concluded our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel would be in connection with the rules of his religion. So the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, "Long live King Darius." We were all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that would be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed, an official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked. So King Darius signed the law. But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down, as usual, in his upstairs room with its windows open toward Jerusalem. And he prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. Then the officials went together to Daniel's house and found him praying and asking for God's help. So they went straight to the king and reminded him about his law. Did you not sign a law that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions? Yes, the king replied. That decision stands. It is an official law of the Medes and Persians. It cannot be revoked. Then they told the king, that man, Daniel, one of the captives from Judah, is ignoring you and your law. He still prays to his God 3 times a day. And hearing this, the king was deeply troubled, and he tried to think of a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. In the evening, the men went together to the king and said, Your Majesty, you know that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no law that the king signed can be changed. So at last the king gave orders to Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and couldn't sleep at all that night. Very early the next morning, the king got up and hurried out to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you serve, so faithfully able to rescue you from the lions? And Daniel answered, Long live the king. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me. For I have been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. Then the king gave orders to arrest the men who had maliciously accused Daniel. He had them thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children. The lions leaped on them and tore them apart before they even hit the floor of the den. Then King Darius sent this message to the people of every race and nation and language throughout the world. Peace and prosperity to you. I decree that everyone throughout my kingdom should tremble with fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he will endure forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. He rescues and saves his people. He performs miraculous signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. And so Daniel prospered during the reign of King Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian.
Wow. So Daniel chapter 6, just a great epic story. It can make a great film.
Oh, yeah.
And it has made a great film.
Yes.
Many a times.
Yeah. So Daniel at this point, and this is, I think, the first thing I want to bring up. Daniel is over 80 years old at this time. And the Bible says that he still has great ability, and that this ability that he continued to use made a big difference in front of the king. And the king decided, I'm going to leverage you and your abilities. And it was, Daniel all throughout his life was quick to recognize that God was one who gave him these abilities, and he was just stewarding them. But I think this is just a great reminder to all of us. It doesn't matter what your age is. Right? Keep using your abilities for God and for God's purposes, and let him do what he's going to do in your life.
Yeah, and I'm actually using the Transformation Study Bible by Dr. Warren Wiersbe.
Oh, yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I was reading the notes earlier, and it talked about how the current officials and the rulers that were in place that betrayed Daniel, they were robbing money from King Darius.
Oh.
So they were scamming off the top.
Oh, yeah.
And they were leveraging their offices so that they could make themselves personally rich. Now, we're not familiar with that in the United States today.
Oh, not at all. I've never heard of that happening
Yeah,
here.
so the motivation...
Politicians getting rich off of their jobs?
Yeah, can you believe it?
Wow. Yeah, no, I never heard of that.
So, as much as things have changed, so much has stayed the same, right?
Yeah. What were they doing? Investing in the stock market before all the news came out?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did whatever they wanted to do. And so Daniel was actually the solution to King Darius's problems. So, all these notes here tell us that Darius was concerned that he was losing money. Of course, he couldn't be over, every decision. So he finds Daniel, who not only has this great ability to run the country and to make all these decisions, but somebody who's actually honest.
Yeah.
Somebody who has integrity.
Yeah.
So the scripture even calls him reliable, faithful.
Yeah.
And so, it's the best of compliments compliments. I mean, listen, if you called me faithful and reliable, that'd be a great compliment.
Right.
If God himself appeared in front of me and called me faithful and
Yeah.
reliable, no higher compliment,
Right,
right?
right.
So the scripture describes Daniel this way. And I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I mean, we have an audience of one, don't we?
Yeah.
We have, what matters, what God thinks is the only thing that matters. So anyway, that's the motivation. It's important for us to understand that he was framed, basically.
Yeah.
And the scripture says they couldn't find any faults. So think about this. And it's common today too, isn't it? Any politician, look for his weakness.
Oh, yeah.
Any superhero movie that we see, right?
Right.
What is his undoing? The female is his undoing.
Right.
I mean,
What's his kryptonite?
Yeah, what is
Yeah,
his kryptonite?
Right.
And they couldn't find one. And the only thing they could think of is let's try to use his religion because he is so faithful. So let's try to use that.
Yeah. Which then put God on the trial. Right?
Yeah, right.
At this point, because they couldn't find anything with Daniel. And I think it's incredibly noble, for one, that here's a man, and this is a lesson to us. The law gets made, and you've heard, probably people have heard the phrase, the law of the Medes and the Persians, and didn't know where it came from. It comes from here. There's so many colloquialisms we have in our language that come from the Bible, right? Go the extra mile, turn the other cheek, all those kinds of things. But the law of the Medes and the Persians could not be changed. And this is where most of the people in the Western world have learned that concept, is from this story. So once it was a law, even the king couldn't change that law. But it says, when Daniel had learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room. So this is not, hey, I don't like that law, I'm going to start protesting it. And I think sometimes Christians get sucked into big social issues that they never were involved with before. It wasn't part of their faith before, but suddenly they're claiming this is a faith issue. And I think that the integrity of Daniel, having already established this consistent walk with God, he's not just reacting to what he thought was a bad law, and suddenly now this is a religious position he's taking. This is something that was deeply embedded in him and in his lifestyle, that his lifestyle was built around this cycle of 3 prayers a day before God. So this wasn't a protest prayer. This was an obedience to God prayer that he was doing. And I love that, because sometimes we can get sucked into the politics of something. There's no politics involved with him on this one. It's just purely, this is what I do. This is part of my faith practice, and I'm not going to change it because the law got changed.
Yeah, that's great. And reading these notes, it has really great insight. They had talked about how King Darius had just conquered, other people in his kingdom. So the Babylonians and the Persians and the Medes, for them to be unified was really a strong goal.
Yeah.
So it said that it's possible that the reason why they were able to convince the king to sign this type of law, what better way to unite the loyalty of brand new people into the kingdom than to use the king himself.
Yeah.
And it was not uncommon for kings to view themselves as God's
Well,
little...
Nebuchadnezzar had wanted people to pray to him too.
Right. Just a few days ago, right? And so so that's one motivation. And let me talk about this. And I've often wondered this. I'm not sure if your mind goes here, but when I read this every single time, here's what I think to myself. I think Daniel could have closed the windows and still prayed.
Yeah.
Right.
He could have hit it.
He could have hit it. Right. So he could have left town and still prayed to God. And Psalm 55 tells us, morning, noon, and night I cry out to you. And so there's a good chance if he prayed 3 times a day, it was probably spaced out, throughout the day.
Yeah.
And it was probably also something so routine that they would have known where to catch him and exactly, when to catch him. But I always thought to myself, like, why couldn't he have just closed the blinds? Why does he have to have them open? And he was taken as a child, Daniel was.
Yeah.
And so he was, opening the windows toward Jerusalem, which is his city. So anyway, here's what I think. I think that when he heard that there was a law specifically, basically designed to entrap him, he probably had no choice but to think to himself, okay, this is more than coincidence. God has allowed this, and this is something perhaps that God is going to use.
Yeah.
Because now the only thing that's in question for me to, save myself is for me to be not as faithful as I have been.
Right.
To be unfaithful in my prayers.
Right.
And so to change my faith and to change my prayers. And so he probably thought it like as a direct challenge, thinking like, I'm going to surrender because I think God's in this.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was.
Well, certainly. I mean, we know that the previous, just a couple chapters before, one of the big themes of the book of Daniel is that God is the king of all kings and that he's the one who establishes kingdoms, right? So, and this is, Daniel has told this multiple times to Nebuchadnezzar. He tells it to Belshazzar, rather. And then, so he's convinced of this. And as an old man, he's always seen God prevail. And apparently God permitted this. And so it would have been futile, I think, for him to have changed his pattern. They would have caught him anyways, and he would have known that. They would have found some way to catch him.
Right.
Because he's going to keep praying. And then I think what it would have done is it would have cheapened his faith if he decided he was going to be intimidated by bully politicians.
Right.
It would have cheapened it, not for him, it would have cheapened it in front of them. And so I think Daniel was very aware of his testimony in this, just like the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It was a testimony thing. I think if he had hidden it, once the threat came, it would have weakened his testimony to others, right? So he had this total trust that, hey, God's going to protect me. I hope. This is on God. It's not on me. But I'm certainly not going to cheapen my faith in front of others because I'm afraid of some threat from some politicians, right?
Yeah, and think about
and
this.
I love that.
Oh, for sure. And think about this. All of his enemies, there were multiple enemies.
Oh, yeah.
It said pretty much every single official.
It said there's 120 groups. There's 120 provinces.
Right.
And Daniel's in charge of all of them.
Right.
And it says all of those leaders rose up against him.
Yes. So had they tried to, frame him, and then had he sort of cowardly, closed the windows or left the city to pray, that is more important. It is his, like, hey, listen, I don't know if you know who I am or who my God is,
right?
But that's just not going to happen.
And you don't find him trying to retaliate.
No.
He doesn't go and immediately try to get new legislation passed to punish those people.
Well,
right?
The king did that for them.
Yeah, king solves that later, but Daniel didn't try to do that. Daniel didn't try to pay back his enemies in the same way that the enemies had tried to treat him, right? So, Darius loves Daniel, clearly loves Daniel. He got sucked in to doing this without really thinking through the ramifications. And I would say for anybody that's listening to the podcast who finds themselves in leadership position, our pride can sometimes get us to make decisions that has negative impacts on some of our best and brightest people behind us. So we have to be careful about our pride because we can get blinded by it. It felt really good. Hey, because you're right, strategically, get the entire kingdom to pray to me for a month. Everybody's going to love me when it's all done, right? Especially if any of those prayers come true, right?
Right.
And so it's going to build loyalty. It seemed strategic. It seemed like these 120 guys were trying to help him out, and he didn't think through the guy that he put the most reliance on was going to have to, pay the price. And so it's important for us to think through beyond just, when our own pride is, kind of stroked and it makes us feel good. We got to think, what are the consequences beyond that?
And it's also a great reminder to seek godly counsel.
Yeah.
So, sometimes, we can seek counsel from one person, but, a multiple counsel of, multiple voices of counsel, I guess is what I'm trying
if
to say.
he'd gone to Daniel, because Daniel had been an advisor to Nebuchadnezzar.
Well, not only that, but Daniel would have immediately known the ramifications for himself.
Exactly.
And it would have given the king more insight, which sort of leads us to believe that the king was presented and signed all in one meeting.
Right.
Is how it reads.
That sounds great. Let me sign
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's great.
So godly counsel is a great thing for all of us. My daughter just moved down to Florida. I think I mentioned that a few times, and I drove her down, and we went looking at apartments, and she looked at the first one and she goes, "Oh, this is it." She said, "I love this." Well, we already had 2 more apartment people waiting on us. And I said, I think, we have all morning. And so she says, "Well, I don't want to look at another one." And I said, "Why would you not want to look at another one? Here's a 51-year-old looking at a 28-year-old.
Right.
And she says, "Because this is awesome." And I looked at the lady. I said, "How many apartments do you have?" She said, "Oh, like 5. I said, "Well, what time will you be here?" 6. I said, "We could have this thing locked up by noon." So just the wisdom. And she goes, "You're right." So we went and looked at the other 2. We come to find out the first one was the best. And she says, "I never really thought about the fact that those other 2 visits affirmed my decision."
Yeah.
And so it's just a little
Because
bit
in
of
the
dad wisdom.
back of her mind someday, she might have thought, man, maybe I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, it was
maybe
a little
there's
bit more
something better
expensive
out
too.
there. Yeah.
It was a little more expensive too. But all of that to say, it certainly doesn't hurt to listen to those who have something to offer in terms of wisdom.
Yeah.
So
So then what you have is Darius then realizes when they come back and go, hey, Daniel, we caught Daniel praying.
Right.
Darius is like, oh, man. He realized he got played. And he spends the whole day looking for a loophole.
which is great.
Yeah. Which shows you how much he loves Daniel.
And values him.
Yeah. But there's the problem is there's no loophole in the idea that you cannot change the law of the Medes and the Persians, right? There's no loophole in that sentence.
Right.
And so he couldn't find a way. And so they start putting pressure on the king. You have to put him in. And I love the fact that the king, who is not a follower of God, recognizes Daniel's faith and says, may your God whom you serve so faithfully, that was his reputation, may your God rescue you. And so Darius is not trying to do incantations to his gods. Darius isn't trying to figure out, oh man, I can't save him, so let me pray to my gods. Darius is putting his own faith in Daniel's God.
And Daniel carries the reputation.
Yeah.
I mean, Daniel has been a part of some pretty amazing things in his lifetime. So Darius, no doubt, would have heard of that.
And I think that this is partly the result of the question you asked a minute ago, why didn't he close the windows? Would Darius have said that phrase if the windows were closed and he was cowering in fear and they got caught hiding somewhere, praying in the basement? He probably wouldn't have said that phrase. He wouldn't have thought, but he knew, okay, this is, one, Daniel's faith is real. The story of Daniel's God in the previous kingdoms before the Medes and the Persians, pretty fabulous. And so at this point now, he realizes, one, Daniel's faith is real, and I know I don't have a God that can rescue you, so you better hope yours can.
So it says here in the Transformation Study Bible that the lion's pit would have been a cave where you were lowered down. There would have been stairs. So it was definitely a place where the lions were definitely down and you were elevated. But it could have also been a pit that had sort of like a removable wall with a rope where the food was on one side, the lions were on the other. And then you would lift this rope. And sometimes it would be up all the time. Sometimes it would be down. But then they would have had to have lifted it up. And the lions would have been, always sort of kept hungry in case of an execution. So they weren't fed often. We don't know how many there were. But from the simple fact that, that Darius was amazed, was a strong indicator that these lions probably didn't let anybody survive. Yeah. So the fact that the next day, and by the way, I love the fact that Daniel says, long live the king.
Yeah.
Right. So what he's really saying is, I'm innocent. Because he later says, I have not wronged you.
Yeah.
Right. Long live the king. My loyalty is to you, king. I may not have, stopped praying for my God, but that doesn't still mean that I'm not loyal to you.
Yeah. He understood the king got put in a bad situation.
Right.
Right. And all that. So in the Life Application Study Bible, it talks about the lion den situation in the note for 16. And it says, God has a way of delivering his people that none of us can imagine. It's always premature to give up and give in to the demands of hostile authorities intent on defying God, because God has power they know nothing about. God can even shut the mouths of lions. What a great phrase.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot to learn from here. I don't know what God is speaking to you about, but I'm going to walk away today thinking about this all day.
It's fantastic.
So, okay, we'll see you next time as we start a brand new series on HC Daily.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us spread the word by liking this episode and sharing it on your social media platforms. Be sure to leave a comment and review, and don't forget to give us 5 stars. When you do, you help us reach even more people who need a daily devotional like HC Daily. If you'd like to hear more from Chris and Jeff, they're both teaching pastors at Heritage Church, located in Southeast Michigan. You can get more of their messages by clicking on the Messages tab at heritagechurch.com. Be sure to join us again soon for another episode of HC Daily.